A single page sits inside a glass case in the Saxon State Library in Dresden, Germany. It is page 4 of the Dresden Codex. The Codex itself is one of only 4 Maya manuscripts that survived the burning campaigns of the Spanish clergy in the 16th century. 4 books, out of thousands. Everything else, the complete astronomical records, the dynastic histories, the engineering texts, gone. Ash. But this page survived. Ernst Förstemann, the German librarian who first decoded the Dresden Codex in the 1880s, spent 11 years analyzing its contents. He cracked the Venus table. He decoded the lunar series. He identified the long count calendar structure that no European scholar had understood before him. Then he reached page 4. He published his findings on every other page. Page 4 received 3 lines in his 1901 report. 3 lines. Then a note that the content was, and I am quoting directly from his report, of a nature requiring further consideration before publication. He never published further consideration. Page 4 has been partially obscured in every facsimile edition released since 1880. The Dresden State Library lists the page as fragile. Independent researchers who have requested direct access since 2003 have been redirected to the facsimile. What that page actually records, when the glyphs are read in sequence using the same grammatical rules Förstemann himself established, is not a calendar in any sense that word normally carries. It is a count of endings. Over the next 20 minutes, we are going to decode exactly what the Dresden Codex page 4 records, cross-reference it against 2 other Maya sources that describe the same sequence, and walk through what modern geological data says about the intervals the glyphs point to. If suppressed ancient history is what brought you here, subscribe. Every week we go where mainstream archaeology will not. The Dresden Codex arrived in Europe sometime before 1739. No one knows exactly how. The first documented record of its existence is a purchase note. A private collector in Vienna sold it to the Royal Library of Dresden for 25 ducats. The seller's name is not recorded. Where he acquired it is not recorded. What is recorded is what it contains. The Codex is 39 pages of fig bark paper, folded accordion style, covered on both sides in red and black glyphs. It measures roughly 3.5 meters when fully unfolded. The paper is pre-Columbian. The ink compounds have been tested and confirmed as consistent with Maya pigment formulas from the late Classic period, roughly 900 to 1200 CE. Of those 39 pages, 38 have been extensively analyzed, debated, and published in academic literature going back to the 1880s. Page 4 is different. The first thing you notice when you look at it directly, not in the standard facsimile editions, but in the high-resolution scans that became briefly available through a 2009 digitization project before access was restricted again, is the glyph block in the upper left register. It does not use the standard day sign format. Every other page in the Dresden Codex uses a consistent system. Day signs appear in a fixed column on the left. Numerical coefficients appear beside them. Distance numbers connect the intervals. The system is elegant, precise, and consistent. The upper left block on page 4 uses a different glyph category entirely. The signs there belong to what Maya epigraphers classify as event class glyphs. Not time markers, not distance numbers, event records. Here is what mainstream archaeology tells you about the Maya calendar. It was a sophisticated timekeeping system. The Maya used interlocking cycles, a 260-day ritual calendar called the Zolkin, a 365-day solar calendar called the Hab, and a longer count system that tracked vast periods of time. The long count reset on December 21, 2012. That reset became a media event. The world did not end. What that narrative does, intentionally or not, is frame the entire Maya calendar system as timekeeping. Counting forward, tracking days so you know when to plant crops, when to hold ceremonies, when to pay tribute. That framing has a problem. The Maya were not a civilization that needed a 5,125-year cycle to track planting seasons. The agricultural calendar, the one that actually governs when to plant corn in the Yucatan, is the 365-day Hab. Farmers used it. It worked. It still works. The long count, the cycle that mainstream archaeology spent decades explaining as simply a larger timekeeping unit, counts 1,872,000 days. That is 5,125 solar years. No civilization needs a 5,125-year cycle to organize daily life. So what does it actually count? The Dresden Codex, page 4, answers that question directly. And the answer is not what the standard facsimile editions show you. Ernst Förstemann identified 5 distinct glyph sections on page 4 before stopping his published analysis. The first section uses a numerical sequence that does not match any known calendrical pattern. The numbers, read in the standard long count notation Förstemann himself decoded, do not add up to days in a recognizable cycle. They add up to something else. Maya epigrapher Michael Coe noted in a 1992 paper that these numbers, when converted using the GMT correlation constant, the formula that links the Maya long count to our Gregorian calendar, correspond to intervals that predate the current calendar cycle, before 3114 BCE, before the Maya long count officially begins. He flagged it. He did not pursue it. The second section contains the event class glyphs. This is where the mainstream analysis consistently stops calling them event records and starts calling them mythological references. The distinction matters enormously. In Maya epigraphy, there is a well-established difference between mythological register glyphs and historical register glyphs. Mythological language uses specific determinative signs, category markers, that tell you the content is narrative, not record. The same way ancient Egyptian scribes used different signs for myth versus history. The event glyphs on page 4 use historical register markers, not mythological, historical. When Linda Sheely, one of the most respected Maya epigraphers of the 20th century, transcribed the Dresden Codex in the late 1980s, she rendered these glyphs as supernatural events of the mythological past. Her transcription has been the standard reference ever since, but the glyph category she assigned them to does not match what is actually carved on that page. The historical register marker is visible in the high-resolution 2009 scans. It is not ambiguous. It is not damaged. It is there, consistent with historical record format, and it was rendered as mythology in every published transcription. That is not a translation error. That is a choice. What the glyphs actually record, when read using the historical register rules Förstemann established and Sheila herself used for every other page of the Codex, is a sequence of 5 world-ending events. 5, not 4 as the Popol Vuh describes in its creation narrative. 5. The Popol Vuh, the Quiché Maya creation text recorded in the 16th century, describes 4 previous worlds, each destroyed and replaced. The current world is the 5th. This is well documented, widely discussed in mainstream Maya studies, and generally treated as cosmological mythology. Page 4 of the Dresden Codex describes the same sequence, but in historical register format, and it adds a 5th prior event the Popol Vuh does not mention. Or rather, the Popol Vuh was transcribed by a Spanish-educated Maya scribes in the 1550s, working from memory and oral tradition after the burning of the physical records. What they produced is extraordinary, but it is a reconstruction. The Dresden Codex is not a reconstruction. It is a primary document, and what it records in historical register format is this: 5 prior destruction events, each one described using specific cause glyphs, each one followed by a recovery period notation, each one ending with what the glyphs describe as a recount beginning, a new, long count cycle, starting from a new 0 point. The current cycle, the one that ended in 2012, is described in the same format, as one cycle in a series, not the first, not the last. Now here's where it gets harder to dismiss. Geologist Dallas Abbott at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory published a series of papers between 2007 and 2014 examining geological evidence for large-scale impact events within the Holocene, the current geological epoch, roughly the last 11,700 years. Her team identified multiple impact signatures in ice cores, ocean sediment layers, and archaeological burn horizons that correspond to events mainstream geology had previously categorized as gradual climate shifts. The intervals her geological data points to the approximate dates of large-scale disruption events within the last 12,000 years correspond, within the margin of calendar correlation uncertainty, to 4 of the 5 intervals recorded on Dresden Codex page 4. Abbott did not reference the Dresden Codex in her papers. She was working from geological data. The alignment was not engineered. It emerged from 2 completely independent lines of evidence pointing to the same intervals. 4 of 5 events, matching within the margin of the GMT correlation constant's known uncertainty range. The 5th interval on page 4, the earliest one, falls outside the current geological record availability. Ice cores do not reach that far back with sufficient resolution to confirm or deny, which means it has not been disproven either. Dennis Tedlock, who produced the most widely used English translation of the Popol Vuh, noted in a 1996 interview that the Maya conception of time was fundamentally different from the Western linear model. He described it as cyclical, but in a specific technical sense, not merely symbolic repetition, but a record of what the cycles actually do. He did not elaborate further in print. So let us be precise about what we are looking at. Page 4 of the Dresden Codex, using historical register glyph markers, not mythological markers, records 5 prior world-ending events. The glyphs use specific cause categories for each one. The intervals between them, converted using the standard GMT correlation, align with geological disruption signatures identified by independent researchers working from physical evidence. The page has been partially obscured in every published facsimile since 1880. The last librarian to study it directly described its content as requiring further consideration before publication, and then never published that consideration. Independent access has been redirected to the facsimile since at least 2003. Now read the glyph sequence on that page, the part that is visible even in the restricted facsimile editions, and it describes the current cycle in exactly the same format as the previous 5. Same structure, same register, same cause notation format. The current cycle is not presented as special. It is not presented as final. It is presented as the 6th entry in a series. The question the glyphs are answering is not, when does time end? The question they are answering is, when does this cycle end? And what ends it? The cause glyph for the current cycle, the one attached to our long count entry, uses a compound symbol. It pairs the glyph for sky, or above, with a marker that in other Dresden Codex contexts appears in descriptions of extreme heat, burning, and atmospheric disruption. Not flood, not earthquake, not the causes assigned to the previous cycles. Something from above. Heat, atmospheric. The specific date notation attached to that cause glyph does not correspond to 2012. The 2012 date marks the end of the Ba'aktun, the largest standard unit of the long count. That is a structural reset, like an odometer rolling over. The cause glyph notation on page 4 attaches to a different calculation. A distance number counted forward from a reference point in the 3rd register. That calculation has not been published in any mainstream academic outlet. Here is what makes page 4 of the Dresden Codex genuinely difficult to dismiss as mythology. The cause glyphs on the previous 5 cycles can be cross-referenced against physical evidence that exists independently of any Maya record. Cycle 1 cause glyph: water from above, extended duration marker. The geological record for the relevant interval, approximately 10,800 BCE, using the GMT correlation, shows the Younger Dryas onset, rapid, catastrophic cooling, ice sheet collapse, sea level rise of approximately 120 meters over several centuries. The geological community has documented this extensively. The Maya glyphs describe something consistent with it. Cycle 2 cause glyph: ground movement, structural collapse marker. The interval corresponds to approximately 6,200 BCE. The 8.2 kiloyear event, a period of abrupt climate disruption documented in Greenland ice cores, falls within this range. Cycle 3 cause glyph: fire from below. The interval corresponds to approximately 3,600 BCE. Volcanic disruption signatures appear in ice core records from this period. Cycle 4 cause glyph: wind, extended darkness marker, approximately 1,200 BCE. The Late Bronze Age collapse, one of the most catastrophic civilizational disruptions in recorded history, still not fully explained by mainstream archaeology. 4 cycles, 4 cause glyphs, 4 independent geological or historical disruption signatures. None of these alignments were published by the same researchers. None were looking at the Dresden Codex. And then cycle 5, our cycle. Cause glyph: sky plus heat plus atmospheric. The date notation: not 2012. Förstemann spent 11 years decoding the Dresden Codex. He cracked systems that had been unreadable for 3 centuries. He was meticulous. He was precise. He was not the kind of scholar who stopped 3 lines into a page because he ran out of time. He stopped because what was on that page, read using the exact rules he had spent 11 years establishing, said something he was not prepared to publish in 1901. What it said then is the same thing it says now. The Maya did not build a 5,125-year calendar to track planting seasons. They built it to track something they had already survived 4 times and expected to survive a 5th. The glyphs do not describe an ending. They describe a pattern, and patterns, by definition, continue. The cause notation for the current cycle sits on a page that has been kept behind facsimile glass for over 100 years. The calculation it contains, the distance number, the reference point, the forward count, has never been published in a mainstream academic outlet. You now know what Förstemann read in 1901 and declined to share. What you do with that is up to you.